The Democrat Party is in a moment of profound reflection after a devastating election loss. Once unified under the banner of resisting Trump, the fractures within the party are becoming increasingly apparent. Some members are reassessing their stance, even acknowledging that not every Trump-era policy was a failure. Others are doubling down on the rhetoric of resistance, clinging to the strategies that once defined their movement. These divisions reflect deeper issues within the party: policy failures, shifting priorities, and a growing identity crisis. And today's first clip captures this moment perfectly. Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks recently shared some candid revelations on a podcast, including her admission of an inherent bias against Trump voters, a bias she began to question after discovering that the kindest man in her building was, in fact, a Trump supporter. It's a striking example of how some within the party are rethinking their assumptions in the wake of their loss.
And certain reversals of Trump-era immigration policies, which at the time I didn't give Trump credit for because he wasn't really applauded for it. And I didn't realize that, the Remain in Mexico policy was actually very successful. And Biden reversing it did lead to the crisis at the border that ended up being a political liability that backed him up into a corner. And suddenly he's hitting up Republicans in the Senate, asking them to write legislation that Republicans would like. So there are some flaws on the left for sure. And I think it's important to be real about those flaws.
It's refreshing to see someone like Anna Kasparian take a step back and approach these issues with a level of objectivity that's often missed with political discourse. Acknowledging the success of certain Trump-era immigration policies like the Remain in Mexico policy shows a willingness to engage with the other side based on facts rather than blind opposition. For too long, this country has been stuck in an opposition for opposition's sake mindset, where party lines take precedence over what's best for the nation. This dynamic has led to government decisions that prioritize scoring political points over achieving meaningful outcomes. Both parties at various times have fanned the flames of division and resorted to fiery rhetoric, neglecting the real needs of the people. But it seems like more Americans, and even some in the media, are finally realizing that selfish agendas can't come before the interests of this country and its long-term success. At the end of the day, we all may have different visions for what the country can achieve, but there are foundational goals and metrics that must be met for us to even have those debates. Until we secure the basic necessities that allow this country to function, like a stable border policy or effective governance, discussions about the bigger picture will remain stuck in partisan bickering. Now, while Anna's perspective represents one approach to reflecting on immigration policy, our next clip shows the opposite side of the spectrum. Here is the mayor of Denver taking a dramatically different stance and going, frankly, balls to the wall with his rhetoric.
I would certainly protest it, and I would expect other residents would do the same.
Trump's new border czar, Tom Homan, has said that he is willing to arrest leaders like yourself for standing in the way of these policies that they want to enact. Would you be willing to go to jail for these things?
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. And I'm also not seeking that. I think the goal is we want to be able to negotiate with reasonable people how to solve hard problems. Republican and Democratic presidents in the past have all tried to find solutions to these problems. President Reagan helped people get access to work so they could stay and support themselves. Biden and Harris worked on restricting entry at the border to close down. There are a lot of ways to approach this problem. We don't think it has to come to this. But yeah, I think when you look at, Ralph Carr has always been one of my heroes. He was the governor who in the middle of the internment of Japanese Americans said this was the wrong thing to do. And he stood up. It was unpopular. People were mad at him about it. That was in the middle of wartime. If the president or any of his actors are going to do things that we think are illegal or immoral or un-American, we'll stand up against them.
Mayor Johnson's firm stance against President Trump's proposed mass deportations reflects a broader trend among city leaders, including those in Los Angeles who have pledged to resist federal immigration enforcement efforts. This resistance comes despite significant public support for such measures. A Scripps News Ipsos poll indicates that 54% of voters back Trump's deportation plans, with 86% of Republicans and 25% of Democrats in favor. While these mayors' positions may seem out of touch with a substantial portion of the American populace, they underscore the federalist principles that allow states and municipalities to make autonomous decisions. However, this autonomy has legal boundaries. Federal law, specifically 8 U.S.C. 1373, prohibits local governments from restricting communication with federal immigration authorities. Non-compliance can lead to legal challenges and potential loss of federal funding. Personally, I believe that prioritizing the interests of American citizens over those who have entered the country illegally is paramount. Unauthorized entry is a violation of federal law and bypasses the vetting processes designed to ensure national security. While I respect the rights of local governments to make decisions that reflect their constituents' values, they must also be prepared to face the consequences of those actions. Notably, cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Aurora, Colorado have experienced increases in crime rates, raising concerns about public safety in jurisdictions that adopt sanctuary policies. Overall, I think that while local leaders have the prerogative to challenge federal policies, they must balance their actions with a legal framework and the broader implications for their communities. Anyway, moving on to a truly dystopian clip, the CEO of NPR, Catherine Maher, had this to say.
But one of the most significant differences, critical for moving from polarization to productivity, is that the Wikipedians who write these articles aren't actually focused on finding the truth. They're working for something that's a little bit more attainable, which is the best of what we can know right now. And after 7 years there, I actually believe that they're onto something. That for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth isn't necessarily the best place to start. In fact, I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is preventing us from finding consensus and getting important things done.
Catherine Maher's remarks reveal a stunning, albeit not entirely surprising, admission that for her, and by extension NPR, getting things done is seemingly more important than seeking the truth. This is the quiet part said out loud. A confession that legacy media, including NPR, is more interested in shaping opinions and achieving political ends than informing the public. It underscores a disturbing shift away from journalism's core mission, presenting facts and fostering informed decision-making among the audience. This rhetoric only reinforces what many have suspected for years. NPR has long behaved more like state TV than as an unbiased public broadcaster, offering little in the way of diversity of opinion. Dissenting views or critical perspectives on mainstream progressive policies are rare on the network, creating an echo chamber rather than a platform for balanced discourse. Given this, it's worth questioning how NPR justifies maintaining its public funding, which, as of recent reports, accounts for about $89 million annually in taxpayer money. Can such funding continue to be warranted when the organization openly deprioritizes objectivity in favor of activism? Maher's framing of the truth as a distraction is particularly problematic. Truth is not an obstacle to progress. It is the foundation of productive and meaningful solutions. By suggesting otherwise, she leans into a dangerous relativism that prioritizes consensus and efficiency over factual accuracy. This is not journalism. It's activism. And it's attitudes like this that have eroded public trust in media institutions. NPR isn't alone in this decline. It's part of a larger pattern where outlets put ideology ahead of integrity, alienating audiences across the spectrum. Maher's remarks are riddled with logical fallacies. By implying that truth-seeking hinders progress, she sets up a false dichotomy where pursuing the truth and achieving results are mutually exclusive. In reality, consensus built on half-truths or political expediency is fragile and often leads to poor outcomes. This approach is not a solution to polarization. It exacerbates it by deepening mistrust and fostering cynicism about the motives of the media. The crux of the problem lies in NPR's inability, or willingness, to separate its journalistic mission from political activism. As a publicly funded institution, NPR has a responsibility to present unbiased, fact-based reporting that reflects a broad range of perspectives. By embracing a mindset that sidelines truth in favor of political expediency, NPR undermines its credibility and its stated mission to educate and inform. Ultimately, statements like Maher's don't just hurt NPR, they damage the media landscape as a whole. When the public perceives journalists as activists, trust in the press erodes, leaving a vacuum that is often filled by misinformation and conspiracy theories. If NPR wants to reclaim its credibility, it must return to its foundational principles: truth, objectivity, and the pursuit of facts, not political agendas. And since we're in the spirit of getting things done, let's look at how Democrat policies are faring in Oakland.
To cut already short shortened police department makes absolutely no sense. And to cut the fire department means absolutely no sense.
Tahira Hodge worries about possible cuts to police and fire. She and her family evacuated from their home last month in the Keller fire. She credits the fire department for saving her neighborhood.
I looked out and I saw all the smoke and there was some fire in the trees, and I was like, oh my gosh.
In a contingency budget plan released in June, the city talked about reducing the police force down to around 600 officers. Right now, the city has roughly 670 officers. Oakland had 613 officers back in 2013, so 600 would make it the smallest force in years. The contingency plan would also brown out a handful of fire stations, freeze positions across city departments, and reduce hours at rec centers, libraries, and senior centers.
Oakland's current crisis, with plans to lay off 70 police officers, close fire stations, and reduce library hours, is a glaring example of the failures of prolonged Democrat governance. For decades, Democrats have controlled Oakland's mayoral office and city council, dictating policies and budgetary priorities. At the state level, California has been under leadership of Democrat governors and a Democrat majority legislature for much of the last few decades. Despite billions in annual budgets, the spending has often been reckless and mismanaged. Funds meant to support public safety and essential services have been squandered on pet projects and bloated bureaucracies. The result? Oakland faces rising crime, fewer first responders, and a diminished quality of life for its residents. Reducing the police force to just 600 officers, its smallest in years, jeopardizes public safety. Closing the fire stations, particularly in a state prone to wildfires, is beyond irresponsible. These policies don't just create a sense of insecurity, they actively put lives at risk. This is the hallmark of Democrat leadership, overpromising and under-delivering. They campaign on grand visions but fail to deliver even the basics: safety, infrastructure, and community resources. It's embarrassing that a once thriving city now feels closer to a third world country, where essential services are cut and citizens are left to fend for themselves. America should not accept this as normal. Oakland's collapse is a warning sign that the current trajectory, influenced by decades of Democrat policies, is unsustainable. Leadership must prioritize the safety and well-being of its people over empty rhetoric and failed ideologies, or more cities will face the same grim fate. And you actually don't have to look any further to see how Democrat priorities are out of step with Americans than trans Congressperson Sarah McBride. In this clip, McBride defends their focus on trans issues like bathroom policies while dismissing critics as politically motivated and out of touch. Let's take a look.
I think we are all united that attempts to attack a vulnerable community are not only mean-spirited, but really an attempt to misdirect. Because every single time we hear the incoming administration or Republicans in Congress talk about any vulnerable group in this country, we have to be clear that it is an attempt to distract. It is an attempt to distract from what they are actually doing. Every single time we hear them say the word trans, look what they're doing with their right hand. Look at what they're doing to pick the pocket of American workers, to fleece seniors by privatizing Social Security and Medicare. Look what they're doing, undermining workers. And here's also what we have to be clear about, because I think the last week has been a prime example of this. Every bit of time and energy that is used to divert the attention of the federal government to go after trans people is time and energy that is not focused on addressing the cost of living for our constituents.
Sarah McBride's statement presents a clear contradiction. While accusing Republicans of using trans issues as a distraction, Sarah continues to focus on the very same issue, spending considerable time discussing it. If the goal is to redirect the conversation to topics Americans care about, like inflation, job security, or the economy, then why not do so? Instead, Sarah devotes the entire clip to criticizing Republicans for allegedly making trans issues central while ironically doing the exact same thing. Beyond that contradiction, Sarah's tone takes on a conspiratorial edge, suggesting that Republicans are undermining workers, privatizing Social Security, and harming seniors. This argument is problematic for several reasons. First, Republicans have not yet taken office. The current administration remains under Democrat control, with Biden, Harris still in power, and Democrats controlling the Senate. If there are pressing concerns, the administration and congressional Democrats are in a position to actually address them. Instead, Biden has been traveling to the Amazon, and Kamala Harris has recently taken a vacation. If these issues are as urgent as Sarah claims, why isn't the current leadership acting on them in their final months? Sarah's argument also lacks factual evidence. Claims of Republicans undermining workers or fleecing seniors are speculative at best, especially considering they currently lack the executive or legislative power to enact such policies. This is a classic example of a red herring, an attempt to divert attention from the present administration's inaction by focusing on a hypothetical scenario involving Republicans who aren't actually even in office. Rather than providing concrete examples of solutions, the statement resorts to fear-mongering, shifting blame without accountability. Ultimately, Sarah's argument feels more like partisan rhetoric than meaningful dialogue. If the goal is to prioritize the issues Americans care about, then the focus should shift away from speculative accusations and toward actionable solutions. The current administration still has the opportunity to address those concerns if they choose to. Our next clip highlights our culture's fixation on the religion of woke, where identity and performative celebration seem to take precedence over substance. Here we see Ariana Grande's lighthearted commentary, which may seem trivial, but it perfectly encapsulates a broader societal trend, one where every gesture or symbol is elevated to ideological significance, even down to cardigans and teacups. Let's take a look.
Every day in the Emerald City is a pride parade.
Oh my God, right? Yeah.
I mean, look at
That's actually great.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Even the chickens. Those
snow
chickens
leopard with
are
the little
gay.
cape.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Dilman in that Bodhi cardigan.
Oh.
Let's wake it up. Let's talk about it. I want that cardigan, and let's just talk for a minute about him and his little custom tea device as well, his little teacup. Dr. Dilly. With his tea and his cardigan. No. I'm just throwing it out there.
It's true.
Gay icon Dr. Dill.
For sure. I do think that scene with his teacher friends or his animal friends, they're all a little bit
very chic.
Snow leopards lounging on the couch.
And the little tamarind monkey.
This clip, though lighthearted on the surface, underscores a deeper societal trend, the elevation of wokeness to a level of religious fervor. As America has grown more secular, nihilistic moral relativism has taken hold, wokeness has filled the void with an orthodoxy that demands not just acceptance but extravagant displays of virtue to prove one's moral superiority. Over-the-top gestures like labeling everything as a symbol of pride or identity have become the new altar where individuals genuflect to signal their virtue and belonging. This modern orthodoxy mirrors religion in its structure and fervor, but it lacks the tested foundation that true faith offers. Religion, particularly Christianity, has guided societies across millennia, proving its effectiveness in fostering productive, equitable communities. America's very founding was rooted in Christian principles that emphasize morality, individual worth, and community cohesion. Yet, as democracy devolves into mob rule, these principles have been distorted into a performative culture where virtue is less about genuine goodness and more about showmanship. The paradox of wokeness lies in its appropriation of Christian principles, like love, acceptance, and charity, while simultaneously rejecting the religious foundation that gives those values depth and meaning. In doing so, it bastardizes wisdom from the Bible, flipping it to fit a political ideology that ultimately lacks the substance and longevity of faith-based systems. This explains why the relentless pursuit of woke virtuosity often feels hollow, leading not to fulfillment but to an empty cycle of self-satisfaction and performative purity. As wokeness continues to dominate cultural discourse, its inherent contradictions are becoming increasingly more evident. Monologues like Ariana Grande's, filled with exaggerated displays of acceptance and identity worship, are starting to ring phony and cringe rather than profound. The likelihood is that this cultural wave recedes, so too will the obsession with proving moral worth through performative virtue signaling. That doesn't mean gay people or other communities will lose acceptance. It means the exaggerated deification of identity as a litmus test for goodness will fall out of step with society. True belonging and moral worth can't be earned through relentless performance or hollow displays of inclusivity. Religious communities offer these gifts intrinsically, providing not only a sense of purpose, but also the framework to live a meaningful life. As the flaws in woke ideology become more apparent, we may see a return to values rooted in faith. Values that stand the test of time and provide real fulfillment rather than fleeting self-aggrandizement. We can only hope. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.